So our first executive is Steve Jurczyk, Associate Administrator in NASA. Steve, come on up, and a round of applause with a lot of energy. Woo, way to go, Steve. Second executive with us this afternoon is Todd, Senior Vice President of Walt Disney World Facilities and Operations Services, Disney Parks, Experiences, and Products. Mark. And last but not least, Carlos Maurer, Vice President of Shell Lubricants Americas and President of Pennzoil Quaker State Company. Carlos. And I'm Katie. Nice to meet you. So the first thing is we'd like to go through some questions. It's going to be a conversation, but we are looking at the time. So if we could start the timer there with our production team, that would be great. So it is going to be, the first question is simple. Tell us about your journey. So we'll go in order, and we could start with Steve and move on from each one of you. What attracted you to your organization, and what was your first job?
So yeah, in July of 1969, I was glued to a black and white TV for days, watching Apollo 11, watching Neil and Buzz land on the moon, and I was hooked. I did not have my career planned out at 7 years old, although I was 7 years old, but I knew I wanted to do something in aerospace. I knew I wanted to work for NASA. Another thing that probably didn't have anything to do with it, but I was born on February 20th, 1962. That just happened to be the day that John Glenn went up, first American to orbit the Earth, so that probably didn't have something to do with it, but might have. I'm not named John or Glenn, which is kind of amazing, because I think every boy born that day was named John or Glenn. And then my father was an engineer. He was a civil engineer, and he was an inspiration and a hero to me, and that's probably one of the main reasons I went into engineering. My first job was designing remote sensing instruments for NASA Earth orbiting spacecraft. Yep.
Thank you. And so since we're on you, we'll continue quickly. What did it take to get to where you are now, and what skills did you have to learn and sacrifices did you make?
Yeah, so I maybe said yes too many times to get to where I am now and not no, but yeah, I mean, basically, for me, the key was to do the best job I could possibly do on the project I was on. Because at NASA, you work on a project, you formulate it, you implement it, you launch it, and then you move on to the next project. So doing the best I could possibly do on the current project, then when new projects were coming along, the project managers would come to me and say, hey, I want you to be on my project. And that's how I was able to advance through project roles, and then eventually became director of engineering, director of a research center, and the associate administrator at NASA. So it's pretty straightforward.
Excellent. And briefly, what advice would you give, Steve, to your former self as a new employee on your career journey?
Yeah, so talk less and listen more. So I used to get in these meetings and just I guess I was just trying to prove I was the smartest guy in the room or something, and talk, and not listen enough. And even when I was listening, I was just thinking about what's the next thing I was going to say. So as a leader, you learn to talk less, listen to more. Diverse teams of people, appropriately led, will come up with the best solution to a problem or take advantage of opportunity than any single expert in the world. I truly believe that.
Thank you very much. And Mark, what attracted you to your organization, and what was your first job?
Well, I think what attracted me to my organization, all you have to do is step outside and look at, we work at and are a part of what we call the happiest place on earth. So it's kind of easy to understand what attracted me to Disney, and during the recruiting process, to be able to walk down Main Street and see what joy we really do bring to so many families, and are part of so many families' happiness. It was a great and an easy choice to come work for Disney.
Thank you. And what did it take to get to where you are, and what skills did you have to learn and sacrifices did you make?
Yeah, I think there's a theme, obviously, hard work. Everybody in this room understands, it really takes hard work. And I think the other thing that is important is whatever your comfort level is, a lot of smart STEM folks in here, So maybe the business acumen side of what you do isn't as natural to you or as interesting to you. So I think you have to make sure that you take time to think about the decisions you're making. What is the business implications of that? With unlimited budgets, all the engineers in the room can design the most amazing products in the world, but it does have to have a kind of a business justification to it and a business impact. So if that's not where you lean to, if that's not your natural tendency, that's probably an area you need to encourage yourself and think about and ask questions, and maybe go talk to the finance manager instead of the engineering manager as you're given that next assignment.
Thank you. And what advice would you give to your former self as a new employee on your career journey?
I just gave it, actually. You know, as a new engineer, it really was about, at first, I didn't really have the big picture in mind as I was giving assignments. So I would maybe design things and give solutions that didn't make financial sense. So to balance that out, I think was a great learning for me. And another thing I think is really important, what I found in my career is there's so many people that are willing to help if you ask. So many people want to help and are willing to help. All you have to do is ask and be humble and really want to know what they have to say and learn from them, and that helps you a lot, both in school and in your professional career.
Thank you. Excellent. And Carlos, the same questions for you. What attracted you to your organization and your first job? What was your first job?
Yeah. Buenas tardes a todos. Yeah, so I was graduating from Rice University with an MBA, and I had a Bachelor in Science in Engineering, and you know, the glamour jobs were banking and finance and so forth, and here comes Shell, and then people say, well, you know, why would you want to work for Shell when, you know, all the jobs are there? And I said, who doesn't want to work for this iconic brand that had, you know, grew up with me as I traveled and lived all over the world growing up. Also, who doesn't want to, travel the world and see the world in a company that is in almost every country in the world? When I started with Shell, and last but not least, you know, a company that always faces huge challenges. So, as an engineer, I really thought, yeah, this is a company that are always going to try to do, the impossible possible. So, yeah, I started in a refinery, actually, as far as a bank as you can see.
Excellent. And what did it take to get to where you are now, and what skills did you have to learn and sacrifices that you made?
Yeah, I think that a little bit like Steve, I think that, work very hard, but also, at least from my experiences, take those jobs that are really difficult. The people that you build a reputation about somebody who overcomes big challenges, and build a core, and then really build around the core new experiences. And I've been very fortunate to, through that, I've lived twice in the Netherlands, I lived in France, I lived in the UK, I manage global businesses for Shell. And a lot of that has to do with, always being asked to do the next very, very difficult job. And I think for me, that is something that has brought me where I am.
Excellent. And what advice would you give your former self as a new employee?
A lot, I will say, but too many to, we'll take the 40 minutes on that. But I think for me, one of the important ones is surround yourself with a good team. I think when you start, you tend to be extremely selfish because you think that it's really all about you. The reality is really about the teams that you work with. And I can tell you this, I look back and there's a direct correlation between the quality of the teams I work with and the opportunity that I was given. So yeah, surround yourself with a good team.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All great answers.